To my black people from all over the world, once again, welcome to Africa Renaissance Show. My black people, I hope that you are enjoying perfect health from wherever you are watching me from. And my black people, today I want us to discuss Indians' racism on Kenyans.
To them, honestly.
I'm trying to pull her leg.
Okay, but is it true that they don't allow Kenyan citizen or the Africans to live here?
No, they stay, but they stay down there.
Down there, and here on in
From
the,
here, there's only Kutch.
only
Kutchis.
Kutchis who stay here.
Yeah.
Okay, so if an African wants to buy a house here, he won't be allowed.
No.
Oh, okay.
My black people, this really talks about a phenomenon that has been very common in the Africa continent. And as you know, in the Africa continent, the British, for example, if I give an example of my country, Kenya, which was obviously colonized by the British. When the British came to Africa countries and colonized Africa countries, they used Indians, to execute their plans. Yeah, in most of the cases. And for instance, if I may give the example of Kenya, they wanted to construct a railway. And this railway connected the coastal parts of Kenya to the hinterland, to the interior parts of the country. And the reason why constructing this railway was very necessary for the British is because it provided them with a mechanism by which they could transport raw materials, from the hinterland, from the interior of Kenya to the coastal parts, so that they could be exported to European countries. And so the Europeans made the decision to come with Indians so that they could execute their projects, like the construction of the railway. And this is because most Africans at that time were not willing to cooperate with the British, because of course the British were coming to colonize and take advantage of the local people. So the local people were not willing to cooperate in the execution of colonial projects like the one of the construction of the railway from the coastal parts of Kenya to the interior, which in this case is coast, which is Mombasa, to the interior, all the way to Nairobi and all the way to Kampala in Uganda. And so the Indians were willing to cooperate with the white people, and very many of them were brought to the African continent, and most of the times they were given supervisory roles. They could supervise the implementation of these projects. And a lot of times there were black people who are used in the actual construction of these projects. So the Indians got this impression that they were superior to the African people because, of course, they were given privileged treatment. And as you know, when the British, were still colonizing Kenya as a country, what they used to do is that they had a hierarchy, a race hierarchy. And this is where the British, of course, they were at the top of the hierarchy. They were closely followed by the Indians. And then we had the Somalis. And then at the very bottom of the hierarchy, we had other Kenyans, who are the majority population in Kenya. And so all along, the Indians were given opportunities, So they became like a wealthy class in the country of Kenya. And they owned a lot of businesses for a long period of time. And as a result of that privilege, they got the impression that they were superior to the African people. And so when African countries were granted independence, like for the case of Kenya, we were granted independence in 1963. Indians never went back to their home countries. Well, there were just a few of them who, went back to their home countries, but most of them, they remained back in Africa. And as I mentioned earlier, they were privileged, and so they had a lot of money. So what they used to do is that they constructed their estates. Yeah, they constructed estates which only admitted Indians, people of Indian descent, exclusively. And if you are an African, you are not allowed, to inhabit in those estates. And the unfortunate thing is that this is an issue that has continued for the longest time, because ever since 1963 and up to now, as we speak, Indians still construct estates, in which they don't allow black Africans, to live in them. And I find this very unfortunate, considering the fact that we have now been independent for more than 60 years, and my issue is, why do we continue to tolerate Indian racism on black people? It's not like Indians are a superpower that, we are scared or we are fearful of picking up fights with them. Yeah? And this is because, assuming it is the Chinese who are treating black Kenyans in the same way, at least you can say that the Chinese are beneficial to Kenya in some aspects, because at least they assist us in the construction of, infrastructure and whatnot. At least they build our infrastructure, but I don't see any significant gains that we get from Indians, that we would be afraid to the extent of fearing to antagonize them and aiding this system of racism that they have introduced in this country and continue to practice up to this moment in time. Yeah? So I don't see anything that we can lose if we stop this racism. And it is very disrespectful of the native Kenyans for Indians to practice racism in this day and age, and refuse black people to live and stay in those estates. And my black people, what I can say is that the situation as it is today in Kenya, it is not the way it was 20 years ago. Because 20 years ago, what used to happen is that Indians had a lot of influence in Kenya. Yeah, they controlled most of the businesses, in this country. But ever since, after some time, let's say ever since the year 2002, Africans became very powerful in terms of, businesses. And today, the black people of Kenya, they control a lot of businesses, and the influence of Indians is very minimal in comparison to how it was in the year 2000. And so I don't see the point why we should continue to tolerate Asian racism, Indian racism on black people. It is not like we are dependent on Indians for business. So this is a clarion call to all politicians all around the African continent, at least to take necessary measures and make sure that we are not discriminated against in our home countries. And my black people, that's all that I have for today. If you want to watch more of this content, make sure that you subscribe to this channel. Goodbye.